Happy to introduce Carla Lynch, who we've done a lot of work together in the gardens over the past couple years. So Carla has worked as an educator at the Morton Arboretum and College of DuPage, and she is educated at in horticulture from the University of Kentucky, and also did the Longwood Gardens program through the University of Delaware. So has a lot of experience in perennials in particular. So in 2016, we asked her to redesign what we had at the time called Perennial Island. Now we call it the Perennial and Ornamental Grass Display Garden. So she kind of, came up with our whole concept for that. If you haven't been out, please come check it out. So we installed that. I think we broke ground we completed it in 2017. And then she's been working with us in the past several years on the maintenance of that garden. So we're really excited to have her to be able to present for you today. So Carla wanted to get some quick background for you. So we're going to do a quick poll. And please let us know how much experience you have with perennial plant design. So we'll give you a couple seconds here. Just a couple more. Most of you are in. The last few, you should see it at the bottom under polls if you're not finding it. All right, so I think we're going to go with that. So I'm going to share the results so you can see. So good, we have a lot of people with a lot of experience. So 79% with more than 5 years of experience. And then a total, I guess, 21% with less than that. So you got a pretty good crew here, Carla, I should know what you're talking about. So, all right. So with that, I will hand it over to Carla.
Are we ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking that those of you who, have a fair bit of experience, some of this will be review. And if we were in a lecture hall, we could have a lot of conversations and question answer, but we can't. So I'm the boss and Shannon is mission control. So here we go. I would like to thank Midwest Ground Covers, especially Krista, for allowing me the opportunity to work with them because it's been nothing but fun. So anyhow, in this program, I'm going to cover very rapidly basic ideas about planting design. And I hope that when we're finished, you'll be more aware of these things, developing design intent, using site givens, identifying plant care. One of the things that's important is developing the intent of your planting. What does it need to accomplish? What's the job of the planting? And before I go into that, I just want to clear up some confusion for more of a beginning audience about the difference between landscape design and planting design. So landscape design, I call macro design. That's looking at the entire site. And you're really considering how people see the site, they move through the site, what they're going to, plantings are going to go, you go into planting design mode. And in planting design mode, you're looking at a very specific section of the overall design. So another thing we want to think about is how a garden style can relate to nearby architecture. Typically, we divide our thoughts into formal architecture, which is symmetrical, informal architecture, which is more asymmetrical, and these can also help guide the design style. So in a formal plan, you'll have fewer plants, there'll be more repetition, you might have to follow geometric outlines, and in an informal design, typically curvilinear bed edges, a wider variety of plants, and replacements are a little easier because there's not a really strong pattern. So if you've been to Midwest ground covers, you've seen informal gardens. I refer to these as matrix gardens. They really lend themselves to large spaces. They typically involve a lot of grasses and full sun, but a matrix garden can be used in any setting. This is a more formal garden. This is at an estate in England known as Hestercombe. Has a lot of geometric layout, geometric beds, and fewer plants and more repetition. So you'll hear me use these terms today. This is from my studying with William Nelson, who wrote this book, Planting Design, A Manual of Theory and Practice. Some of you may have that book. I have found it very useful when I want to create a unified look or balance something, to try to manipulate my material to have some of these principles. So on to the next thing. We're going to talk about site givens. Where is this planting design going to be? When you're designing a space and you identify the primary location of the viewer, I mean, there may be several places. There may be an approach to a home. There may be the view from the kitchen window. There may, if you're in a tall office building, there may be the view that goes down into a courtyard. You have to identify where people are going to see these designs and how much they're going to see at a time. I don't know if you can see my arrow, Shannon, maybe you can help me here, but typically, if the viewer, wherever the viewer is standing, you can have an angle of clear vision, and that's approximately 30 to 45 degree angle. So that helps you figure out where the planting design is going to begin and end. So what are the site givens of this planting design? Midwest Ground Covers uses this terminology on their website in the catalog, and I wanted to be sure that you understood how best to use this information. So light is figured during the coming up and blooming and all that sort of thing at different times. But we generally figure light requirements as the sun moves towards its zenith. And this would be the definitions of these attributes. The thing that I find most people don't realize is that full sun is 8 hours, from 8 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. And plants that tolerate shade might also tolerate some morning sun. Plants that really prefer sun might tolerate a little bit of morning shade. Sun to shade, variable. These are kind of fluid descriptions, and they require some experimenting. But this gives you a little better picture of how all of that looks. Also, you want to check soil moisture. And the best way to do this is to dig a hole. Here are the instructions. You can see what happens after putting water in the hole. I frequently will take a soil probe to a site and check around. It's also a great tool for putting into a bulb and burlap plant or a container to see what's going on down in there. This little jar is something that refers mostly to soil structure. And our soils tend to be a fair bit of clay, and when it's dry, it's bone dry, but it does stay moist a long time. So I'm going to back up to this. This would be your 100% mark. So this much would be clay, this much would be silt, and this much would be sand. The clay is dispersed in the water, and that's why that top one is clay. It's the smallest particle. So you can see almost half of this is clay, and then, 20% silt and 30% sand. Actually, that's probably a pretty nice soil. I might have gotten that out of my backyard because I inherited very nice soil. An important thing to remember here with this way of discussing soil moisture is that you have control over that. You can add compost to help it retain moisture. I do want you to notice this MD does not stand for medium dry. It stands for moist with good drainage. And ironically, the majority of perennials fall into that category. So remember that. Now we're going to talk about the design characteristics of plants. And the key thing to think about here is a concept that is occasionally called visual energy. With design, there's a lot of different people who write about design and talk about design, and they use different terms. And again, I kind of like following William Nelson. He talks about visual energy. And that is how when you look at a planting plan, your eye is immediately drawn to something. It has a lot of visual energy. Some plants do, some plants don't. If you're including structures or hardscapes in your planting plan, those things will have more visual energy than your plants. So it's just, it's a tool for understanding where people are looking. And these are the things, if you want to create drama, you need to have some high visual energy plants or structures or something. So, and these are the characteristics that create visual energy, that create high visual energy. Also, you can balance visual energy. High visual energy, I call the stars. In a 7-part, if you divide your planting plan into 7 parts, this is like cooking. 1 part needs to be the stars, 2 parts needs to be medium, and 4 parts needs to be the chorus, which is usually fine texture or low visual energy plant material. This is a little chart that helps you see this, that as we go from low visual energy to high visual energy, you'll see how certain forms and certain leaf textures have more or less visual energy. The other, probably the main thing that most people think about with perennials are the flower shapes and color. You're not familiar with a color wheel, that you get one and keep it in a desk drawer so that you can refer to it on occasion. It's a great way to spark some creativity and really helps you understand. To get drama, to get high visual energy, you need to have contrasting colors. Contrasting colors are opposite each other on the color wheel. And now these are contrast. The term we use for that is tone. They're pale. This is a pale yellow or a light yellow, and this is like a pale violet or lavender. And so we also have light and dark colors, but still you need to understand contrasting colors. Analogous colors are next to each other. I'm going to back up and show that slide again. They are red, violet, blue, green, green, yellow, green, lemon, yellow, orange, red, orange. When you have colors next to each other, that can make for a beautiful, oops, what happened here? There we go. Let's go to the next with colors that are in what I call the same color family. So this is like pink, rose, cool color family, yellow, orange, gold, a warm color family, makes for smooth transitions. But flower color is fleeting. And frankly, when I'm designing, as you'll see later, I want to pick form and height first, and then foliage color and foliage texture next. And I worry about flowers at the end. These are the terms that Midwest Ground Covers uses to describe leaf color. This is for leaf color. And you see here, leaves come in a lot of different colors. So the next thing you need to do is develop a list of potential plants. And I will frequently thumb through, I'm going to back up here a second. I will thumb through a catalog. I will look at bit lists of plants on websites, just to spark my creativity and remind me, because we tend to kind of fall into a rut of the same plants we use over and over. The process of creating a planting design for this space under the crab apple. So I know what the intent is. I want to, this looks kind of icky, for lack of a better term. And we just want to spruce that up a little bit so that when people are walking along the sidewalk or coming around the back of the house, they have something to look at here. So I've given you, probably read through this now. I've given you all the information that relates to my design intent and what this planting needs to accomplish. So next, I went to the Midwest Ground Cover's website and I clicked on plant search. And 2 drop downs are there, a plant search and a plant library. And the library has everything. The plant search typically has more of what's currently available. To really get availability, you have to click on the availability tab. So what I did is clicked on plant search and I got into that page. And then I decided to click on light first because I felt like this was a shady site. I could change the soil a little, but I couldn't really change the site because of the big trees. And I clicked on shade. I also clicked on shade to sun, or part sun, I should have said, because clicking on one category can give you a small group of plants. And there is a little button that you can push to include plants that hit at least one of these categories. Then a huge list of plants came up. And I scrolled through those plants, quickly looking for things that had kind of warm color scheme, and also were preferred a dry or a moist, well-drained soil. And once I found plants I liked, then I clicked on more information. And a little caveat here, you will see that many perennials have a preference for sun or sun to part shade. That's the bulk. And in terms of soil, many perennials have a preference for moist, well-drained, okay? So you need to understand that, and then you need to learn about tolerances. So in the catalog and on the website, Midwest is referring to the preference that plant has. It may tolerate the next situation. It may tolerate it just fine, or it may live but not thrive. And this is something that you can really only learn from experience. But it's an important thing to understand that these descriptors are for preference. So after I read the information, there's a place where you can click on add to my palette. So I did that, and I kept doing that until I had all these plants. And then at the end, I was able to click on save and print, and I got this PDF. Now you should know that there's a whole cluster of these PDFs on our website, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. So now I have a plant list. I still have to use design principles to lay out my material. So here's the garage. Here are the sidewalks coming down and going up. So the view is in through here, and the other view is across. So where I'm circling now with the arrow, that's where the swing set is. This is a big space. It really needs a path. Sometimes you have to break your space into smaller pieces. I also felt that the lone crab apple did not provide the kind of height transition that I wanted from the tall trees to the crab apple to the ground. So I added in some shrub material, the bottle brush, and I placed the shrubs first. So we got the tree is the biggest thing, then the shrubs. Then I started to place what I call anchor plants. And these are the perennials. If you didn't have shrubs or a tree, these would be the perennials that would have a long season of interest. Their shape would be kind of neutral, but they would have good foliage all season. And you locate those kind of at the beginning and the end and scattered through the middle. And then you kind of build the rest of your plan around that. So you can see what I did. After I located my anchor plants that have coarse foliage, the hosta and the ligularia, I added in the Heuchera pistache, which is a great lime color, just to add a little brightness to this kind of dark spot. And then I picked, again, plants from the warm color scheme that have medium foliage texture and plants that have fine foliage texture. And the use of variety in leaf texture, but also repeating, that gives some balance. The emphasis would be created by these coarse textures. There'd be a height sequence from the ground level to the shrubs to the trees, and the scale of this material is appropriate for that site. So now we've had a good review of the whole process. So I thought it would be fun to take our new additions. These will be planted into the perennial garden this year. That's one of the things that Shannon and I work on together, is taking out what they're no longer offering and adding in new things. So we'll be figuring out where these go. If you haven't seen it, the perennial garden is laid out in loose alphabetical order with all the plants in the same species and cultivar close to each other, different cultivars close to each other, so you can compare them. So anyhow, this is our list of new plants, and we're going to place them on the stage with the supporting actors and a chorus. So in alphabetical order, this large showy Brunner has a lot of visual energy. It's because the silver and white, it kind of places it in a cool color family. There is a variegated Brunera that has kind of a creamy variegation that I would use that with more warm color things, but this is really cool. So I wanted to repeat kind of a blue thing. I picked out hosta, I picked out a blue carex, and then we go into the mauves with this orchid frost lamium. Our shade plant could be a red bud. We've got some astilbe, dwarf Chinese astilbe, and then a little pop of blue here and some dark foliage on this Ajuga to balance that out. I would like you to know that on the website, under the tab for our gardens, and then you go to the perennial and ornamental grass display garden, you can find these PDFs, and they're labeled, palette 1, palette 2 through palette 12. And the plants are all labeled on the PDF, so you don't have to try to write down names and remember them. So then I kind of analyzed this echinacea for its design characteristics, and I feel like white is good as an accent, but it can't really carry a design unless you decide you're going to do a whole white garden and it's going to light up in the evening. So one of the big things here is this cone. So I thought I'm going to work off that cone. Clear white is so nice with blues. So Salvia, Baptisia. Then we're going to bring in contrasting colors, another echinacea in red, kind of analogous colors to the cone, and some grasses. I felt like it really needed some bold foliage. I decided to add in some prairie dock. So that gives you kind of an idea. Gentiana Elba, cream gentian. This is a new plant to my palette, but I like it. It's not high visual energy. It's sort of in the chorus, maybe sometimes in a supporting role, but it's an interesting flower. And I think because of the white, it lends itself to more of a cool color scheme with blues and pinks. And one thing I want to point out here is that this gentian is a native plant. And so in order to put it in the right, use it in the right site and have other plants that like that site, when I went to the website and I did a search, I was able to click on all the plants that are native to the Mesic Prairie. So they have similar moisture needs and similar sun needs. And then a list came up and I just went through those and picked out pale, I wanted to use pale colors, pale pink, pale blue, pale purple. And I was able to find plants that either were also native or that were appropriate, even though they were exotic. So should check the time. Shannon, how are we doing? I think we're doing pretty well. Our next,
Yep, we're in good shape.
okay. Next is our Heliopsis. And last year, I remember the Heliopsis flopping over, laying down, and then growing up crooked again. These can get to be really big plants. So if you're not going to stake them, you have two options. You can surround them with shrubs that will give woody plant structure that will hold them in place, or you can trim them back to 2-3 sets of leaves right around Memorial Day. And they'll bloom a little later, but they'll be a little denser and not quite as floppy. But if you need something tall, you know, maybe you're working on a big site, or this could be a really nice planting to be seen from a distance. Most people think red is the color that shows up the best in the landscape, but actually it's yellow. Yellow and variations on yellow are really the most attention getting. And that's why you have a yellow light to tell you that the lights are going to change, not a red light, a yellow light. So if you really need to draw attention in a sunny area, you want to try to use those warm colors. And because Summer Nights has these dark black stems, I thought it'd be fun to put it with a smoke bush or the Black Hawk's andropogon. Again, bringing up the warm colors and then thinking about what we're going to do down at ground level, something for fall. And I was looking for, you know, another shrub to put in here. And I thought, well, okay, Direvilla. Well, just, I'm using an analogous color that is not quite as bright in a supporting role. Here are our hibiscus. There's 3 new hibiscus this year. I put these two together because they both have kind of a dark foliage, and they're pink, but they're in the cool color range. This is red and white and blue put together in various amounts. If you were to mix paint, that's what you'd be using. And I really like keying off the dark foliage, and I like keying off the centers of those hibiscus as well. So hibiscus like this get cut down and then come up and bloom later in the season. So you have to have something going on in the spring, and then your material that can be showy with them later in the season. So here I felt these are kind of blocky and heavy plants. You don't need too many. They have high visual energy. You could use them together, or you could use 2 or 3 of the same kind. And I decided to pick a palette that kind of picked up those blue and purple colors for spring and fall. This is one of my favorites, this beautyberry calicarpa. And also, you know, maybe you have a trellis or an arbor and you can put some clematis on it. And something that Shannon and I noticed last year is this little violet bloomed like all through the season. It was just amazing. It just kept going and going and going in full sun in moist, well-drained soil. So here we've got a little yellow center. We'll key off that with a peony and the fine textured moonbeam coreopsis. And up in the corner here, we've got some calamagrostis brachytricha, which can take sun and a little bit of shade and has a nice pink bloom to it. So fine texture, medium fine, medium fine, medium fine, you know, so we've got kind of a good amount of different things here. I'm going through these rather quickly. I don't know if you're having questions. I know this way we'll have time for more questions at the end. Anyhow, this is the 3rd hibiscus.
Yeah,
that's
and Carla.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just jump in?
Yes.
We seem to be having an issue with the Q&A. I don't know why, but my answers don't seem to be showing up, or maybe they are now. So we'll try to answer as many questions as possible, you know, live at the end of the presentation. So I can see your questions coming through, and we will address as many as we can that way. So just so everybody's aware.
Okay. All right. Any other announcements, Shannon?
No, I think we're doing good
Everything
besides
okay?
that.
All right. All right. So our third hibiscus, completely different really from the other two, except for this foliage. This is more in the red range. This is not in the pinky blue range. It's in the red range. This is more what I would call, this is where we get a little differentiation between the reds, because you can have corally red and you can have crimson and you can have scarlet. And what I did is, because the sanguisorba and the hibiscus have the same siding requirements, I kind of like the idea of putting them together. I can use this sanguisorba as fine textured and bring some lightness and a huge amount of contrast to this, as well as to these other plants that I've selected. So, so that's why I put on plant palette number 6. I have two newbies. So I felt that because, again, this is kind of heavy and in the red family, I wanted to use analogous flower colors, not contrasting flower colors, but kind of analogous flower colors. So I went into the coral range with roses, even though this Aquilegia is very, it's ephemeral, it's still mighty pretty, and it would be a great play off of this very nicely. The coral bells, the fireflies, about the same color as those hibiscus. I have this coral cream drop phlox in my garden. It bloomed and bloomed and bloomed, no staking, fabulous. Jacob Klein, this scarlety red Monarda, and this is one of my new favorites, is the chocolate chip Ajuga. So that was my one way of repeating the leaf color, was to use that, and that'll have blue flowers, but that is just a super fun plant. So okay, next. This is like a poll, Shannon. At this point, we have a few more plant palettes to discuss, and it occurred to me that you might be sick of doing this because you already have created a lot of plant palettes that you can pull out of the file and use. I recommend that. So you may have had enough. Then if you've been dealing with a cold and snowy winter, you might never be able to get enough of pictures of plants. And I was sort of curious who already uses this process. So I'm not sure how we can find that out, but it's kind of what I call the backward process.
Yeah, we should have set up another poll for that. We
should have set up another poll.
They can throw answers into Q&A, but yeah, we don't have another poll for that.
Yeah, no, I would say just if you want to throw your answers into Q&A, because then we'll know if we need to modify for the audience. So, but not knowing who was coming today and where they are, this just seemed like a way to break things up a little bit. So you might need to stand up and stretch. They say you're only supposed to sit at the computer for 20 minutes and then get up and walk around. I'm looking at my picture in the presenter's box, and it looks like I'm actually turning into a plant, which doesn't surprise me because I've been doing this for so long. Okay, on to Rainbow's End. Some people might say, how could you have another hosta? But frankly, the path through the hosta display is really lovely. And contrasting this hosta with other hostas is it's going to be a lot of fun when I put that in. You'll have to come later in the season and see where I decide to put it. But anyhow, because of this kind of creamy limey green variegation, I again wanted to go to its opposite to create some drama. So I have two different astilbes here, Purpurcurs and Astilbe chinensis pumila. Same flower color. This is tall, this is short, so that's kind of fun. I've added a little carex that I like to use, Carex plantagenea. It's a kind of a wide leaf, short carex. These all like the same soil. Some of these plants probably like a little bit more moisture. So that's something to think about. I wanted some contrast. I put in the Ophiopogon. Because you're in a shady site, it's fairly protected. That'd probably be okay. And this one up in the corner is the Waxy Bells Crankshima, which was a big star when it first came out, but we discovered it's kind of difficult to grow in the upper Midwest unless you have it, again, by a moisture area, good drainage, but also some moisture. So this doesn't show the flower. This is our little uvularia that blooms in the spring. And then to get that, to maintain that kind of violet range to contrast, I have the violet colored Vinca. Iris versicolor purple flame. I know Iris versicolor, but purple flame was new to me. And I see some marsh marigold down in here. Another good plant to go with this would be the, not plume poppy, it's the yellow poppy that grows in the spring, just to contrast that. But I was thinking more for a little later in the season to add another blue. This photo is a little purpley. This is really a very blue flower on the Lobelia syphilitica. So that would be a good one. These all like moisture. Milkweed, these big pink and white milkweeds like moisture. My Monet lobelia, nice kind of doing this pale purple blue thing together, and then incorporating lime green with lady's mantle, Alchemilla. They do sometimes get rust on the leaves, and late in the season, I think that's from the soil being too dry. So if you can put them just up from the edge of a stream, they would be very happy. And then the native hibiscus here, really pretty showy. So this was fun to put together. And the little zizia at the end, another spring bloomer, picks up the color on the fall of the iris. Nepeta. Let's have another Nepeta.
Carla?
Yes.
We did have a couple of people answer, and it seems like a lot of people are using a similar process as this as well. Just that some of them also consider bloom time. So
bloom time.
Yep.
Right. Right. Good. I did, I felt like if I picked enough plants, I would get things that were blooming at the same time, which is important, but you also really need to consider form and leaf texture. So, so anyhow, good. Glad to hear that. So Nepeta cat's pajamas, Penstemon Midnight Masquerade, somewhat similar flower color on these. This looks a little maybe mauvier, but I just kind of like the idea of putting these two together with their same site needs. And the fact that this cat's pajamas, you can keep that blooming all summer if you want. I put that with the Viola labradorica, the little early violet with the dark foliage that likes to move around a bit. But I think that was a nice way to pick up the dark foliage on this. And then I put in sedum Carl here, which has similar requirements. And I wanted to contrast this, to create the drama, to contrast these with something that would be present all season. And so that's why I've put in the Sambucus lemony lace to contrast this foliage. And then early in the spring, get this forsythia going. This will be going, this will be going, this will be coming on a little later. Then these will be going, okay? And then these will be going with this foliage and this. So Peony Barzilla, yellow peony. Love these peonies. Stems are very sturdy. There's no flopping. And that pale yellow goes really well with this purple palette. I'm just going to point out a couple things here that are relatively new plants for me, but a lot of fun. And this is the grape lollipop phlox, which that's, photographs can lie, but that's pretty much a true color. And this Baptisia, I think this is Twilight Blues. The other is kind of a funny little dwarf plant. This is Sunstruck, Heliopsis. And I just really liked this foliage with the pale yellows. And then the contrasting it with the blues. I think could be really fun. This one took a little while for me to pull together, and I'm certainly, since there's so many people in the audience who have a lot of experience, I'll be very interested to hear from you with recommendations of things to put together. So this Solomon seal that has red stems, that's ruby slippers. Now I use the variegated Solomon seal quite a bit. It's been very easy to grow, and I could have thrown that in here with this, but I wanted to try some other things. So I was looking for ways to play off red in the shade. And I like the idea of using the, I think this is chocolate shogun, a stilbe, and the ligularias that have the dark foliage. And then so we can use that cream gentian, and we can use Annabelle hydrangea, the white flowers here. Ginger is a great, very easy to grow plant in the shade, and very good for adding little pops of coarse texture. And then again, the little plantain again. Chesbanthium, it can seed itself and become aggressive, but in the shade, it's not quite as bad as it is in part sun. Sedum Coral, I think this is our last one. Oh my gosh, I got really carried away. There were a lot of pink flowering and blue foliage plants in our list that had, wanted to be in full sun with moist, well-drained, not medium dry, but moist, well-drained soil. So I just had a lot of fun putting this together. And I kind of, again, incorporating some grasses, incorporating some shrub material, having some early bloomers, some mid-season bloomers, some late season bloomers. You can't always, you don't always have enough space to put in enough material to get a color palette in each season. That's very tricky. And so your form and your foliage colors can help carry you through the seasons. There's many ways to use the plant search function and the palette, creating your own palette function on the website. I also will occasionally download, like I will go into plant search, I'll download everything that grows in the shade or everything that grows in shade to part shade. And you can export that list as an Excel file. So you export that list, and then you can add in other characteristics, and then you can sort that data. So maybe some of you are already doing this. I'd like to know who has already created a lovely big file. I call it Right Plant, Right Place, where I can pull up everything that has coarse texture or everything that has whatever, everything that associates with, Mesic Prairie. And it's really nice to do that. I have noticed with our system, you can't really add in more than 2 things from a particular category. It just gets overloaded. So you have to be kind of careful about that. So I guess you're using the process. It's the backward process. Maybe it's the forward process. It makes sense to me. The thing that will be hard for those of you in the 20% who are kind of newer to this is that design is a process that happens in your brain. I've given you some palettes, but there's many different plants. There's always a plant that can fit the need. And, but if you know what need you have, if you know what texture you need, if you know what height you need, and then look up plants that have those characteristics, it'll go a lot faster. And if you come across, a palette that you like, if you're out driving and you see something you like, then you got to take some pictures of those and keep track of what those are. That is a wrap. Oh, great.
Okay.
There are the hostas. This is a lovely walk. There's Crankshima. How about that? Lots of fun with the little bitty hostas too.
Yes, and we had somebody comment that they've had very good luck with Crankshima as well. So
Good. I want to know where they put it.
they said north side of a house, but it does get some late sun, 12 to 15 years old. So
that's great. Must and good soil probably.
Yeah.
So we're going to take some questions. Shannon's going to handle that.
Yeah.
I put my email up here. Don't hold your breath for a return. I'm retired and I'm on vacation in Florida, I'm sorry to say, but I will get back to you eventually. I also want to recommend a couple of these books. I know everybody learns online now, but there are still a few good books at the library that will help you. Shannon.
All right. So our questions. Well, first of all, we had several questions about both, I think, Karla's design palette and the design palette tool. So I did answer one of the questions there, but Karla's specific design palettes, we will be emailing those out in the follow-up email after the presentation, so you can find them there. Or also, if you go to the Midwest Ground Covers website, there's a button at the top, Our Gardens. If you go down to the Perennial and Ornamental Display Garden, there are a couple Excel, there's an entire plant list, an Excel list, and a PDF, and then the plant palettes are also there too. So that's where you can find the specific palettes that Karla went over today. If you just are looking to use the design palette tool on the website, if you are in any plant on our website, so you've searched the plant, you've clicked into it, there's a button that says add to my design palette. And then if you go to under plant search, if you go to the plant library, there's a button at the top where it's design palette, and then you can get to your palette of plants that you've already saved. So unfortunately, you can only have one palette at a time right now, but we do website upgrades all the time. So we will definitely keep in mind, the ability to create more. So just a couple of things on that before we kick off. Okay, so first question is, of all the soil amendments available at Midwest Ground Covers from Midwest Trading, which do you recommend to amend soil prior to planting perennials? So a couple that were listed were One Step, compost, leaf mulch.
Okay, two things. I like to prep once in the creation of a bed, and then I don't like to dig it up again, but just add a few inches of compost every year, or add compost at the time of, like with perennials, it's a unpainted, it's an oil painting that never dries. So you're taking things out, putting things in, making adjustments. Every time you move plants, you want to add a little compost. I love the new product, the One Step, and I'll tell you why. It has a more of a balanced pH. I used to sometimes use pine fines mixed with peat moss or mushroom compost. But mushroom compost by itself has very high pH, and our soils have a high pH. And so I was like taking the high pH mushroom compost and mixing it with the low pH pine fines. But what I like about One Step is that it already has that in there, and it can function very well as a mulch or as a soil amendment. In the gardens at Midwest, we use leaf mulch to mulch the beds, and we use a playground wood chip for our paths. Shannon?
All right, question on sedum. Do you cut back sedum prior to July 4th so it doesn't get so tall and flop over? And actually, I don't know if we just have a couple more questions, so we have some more time. So if you want to talk about kind of the maintenance that we do in Perennial Island at all, or the
Okay,
Perennial Display Garden.
okay. Yeah, if we have had a rainy spring and generally good weather for perennial grow, and things are growing, we can tell that things are going to get really big, then we will do a perennial pruning around Memorial Day. And that will be on plants that are typically going to be summer or fall blooming, not the spring bloomers, except for some things like salvia and nepeta, which respond so well to being pruned and pruned and pruned again. And some people call this the Chelsea chop. You may have heard Austin refer to it as the Chelsea chop, because that last week in May is when the Chelsea Flower Show is. I'm not sure if they're having a show this year. Britain seems
It's pushed
be
back to
having as
September, I
much
believe I
with the
heard.
COVID September. Okay, we'll see. I still have a I have a ticket to fly over there that's good for 2 years. Didn't get to go last year, but I like doing the pruning in terms of, I think it's much easier to prune than to deal with big floppy plants and staking. And if you cut back late in the season, then you don't get the grow back. So it's a maintenance call. If if you're on a real tight maintenance budget, then you want to use plants that don't require any pruning. And we do try to indicate in the display gardens, we're developing a system whereby we can indicate when something's been pruned by a special label that's with the plant. So we'll work harder at that this year.
Mm-hmm. And
What else,
that's particularly in the perennial display garden. And in most of our other display gardens, we really don't do any pruning or cutting back throughout the season. But in the perennial garden, since we're trying to, showcase those plants and have them look their best, we do. But like Carla said, we'll try to indicate what we've done.
Right. I might add, Shannon, that that's one of the big differences between the matrix style gardens and a traditional perennial garden, is that the idea is that you don't prune and that you just are enjoying the plant as it does whatever it does all through the season and into the winter. So it's really less maintenance in terms of pruning. But you're right. We want those perennials to put their best foot forward. And so that's why we do the pruning in the display garden. What else?
So then it looks like we just have one more question that kind of piggybacks off that was asking about deadheading, but then also how much maintenance the display gardens are as far as water and herbivore, or I would assume that's implying deer and rabbit protection.
Yeah. Interestingly, we have different animal issues every year. One year it's deer, one year it's rabbits. At this point, we don't use any fencing. We're in an open site where we probably have coyotes and predators. So if they come in and munch a bunch of stuff, then we're in a position where we can replant. You may not be in a position where you can replant, and so you may have to institute some deterrence. So I would say that I'm trying to figure out which is worse, the deer or the rabbits. I think probably we have enough material in that garden. I mean, how much do we have in there? Like 350 different things, or that there's still something looks good. So the scale of the garden helps cover up the damage. So at this point, if something's really bad, we might fence a particular genus, but other than that, we don't. And then deadheading, again, if we can get to it, you know, we want those plants to look top form. And so whether it's pruned or deadheaded, there would be a label explaining that. We sometimes also leave plants unpruned. We don't deadhead them so that you can see what they look like. And it's a different, when you're deadheading and pruning, it's just a completely different look and style than when you are. And it's a decision that you have to make based on your design intent. You know, if you have a high-end client that's doing lots of parties and it's got to look perfect all the time, then you're going to have to prune and deadhead and replace plants that get damaged. And if you have a big commercial site where it can kind of be hidden, then you don't have to. Want to add anything to that, Shannon? Watering. I will say we do not have an irrigation system. And we water, there's several hose bibs, and we set up sprinklers, and those are run as needed. And then new material is hand watered. One of the challenges for us is that we are adding plants all the time because we have new things that we're offering, and we're deleting plants and adding plants and moving things around. And so we frequently have new material next to established material, and we try to flag those plants. It's a blue flag that says stay on top of the watering, because you really have to stay on top of watering the first couple years. Even if something is drought tolerant, it has to be watered the first few years to get it established. So I personally think watering is the most critical aspect of gardening in the upper Midwest. Watering at the right time, the right amount at the right time. Yeah, it's a challenge. Want to add to that, Shannon?
Yeah, when we have a summer like last year, you know, where we get real hot and dry for an extended period of time, it's tough to keep up with. You know, in a normal year with the established stuff, generally we're fine. But when we hit those really hot, dry years, yeah, it's a challenge. It can be a lot, as I'm sure you all out there know. So okay, we've got like one more minute. We've got a couple more questions. We'll try and get them really quick. We might go over by a minute or two. So there was a question about sharing the slides. I don't believe we were planning to share the slides, but the presentation again will be posted to our website and our YouTube page in a couple of weeks, or within the next couple of weeks. Usually it's within a week or so. So you can follow up with them there. Then what else did okay. There was a question about, do we avoid using double bloom nativars that may be beautiful but are less useful to pollinators? So I'll answer that really quickly. The intent of the perennial and ornamental display garden is to showcase every perennial and grass that we carry in our catalog. So obviously, you know, not everything we carry in our catalog is you know, necessarily geared towards pollinators. So, but that's the purpose, to showcase everything we feature. And then we have various gardens. We have a new garden out at the natural garden that's all local ecotype native. So then we kind of address those native needs in other places.
Shannon, are you done?
Yep.
I want to add to that one of the attributes that you can search for on the website is pollinator, good pollinator. So if you click on that, you'll get a list of all the plants that Midwest Ground Cover sells that are good pollinators. So that's a good place to start. But that's not the design intent of our display garden. Right. There are good pollinators in there, but that's, again, remember we talked about design intent, and that it's really just to showcase everything.
Yeah. Okay, so then the last question we have is kind of a long one, but can you give an example of a moist, well-drained area on a residential lot? The last several years have brought significant spring rain, and shady spots seem waterlogged in spring and are very dry by July. So how to identify a moist, well-drained area in this climate?
Whoa, okay.
Save the
I
best
think-
for last, Carla.
Right. Well, I mean, basically what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to do some modification. You're going to have to create a little bit better drainage. This sounds really crazy, but one of the things I have done on sites is I've taken a bulb drill, attached an electric drill with a bulb drill on the bottom, which is about 2 or 3 inches wide. You can get hydraulic drills. We have like a 4-inch drill and an 8-inch drill that we use when we're doing a big planting. And you drill holes at that site. And then you mix compost and pea gravel. And you fill those holes with compost and pea gravel. And over time, you're going to get better drainage. And it's not going to be as dry in the summer. But when you have tree root competition, you will have to do additional watering in the summer. There's no doubt about it. You know, it's easy to put water on, it's hard to take water off. So you have to select plants that can tolerate that spring wetness. And I would look for, spring wetness, and then look at their associates. One of the books I didn't add on here was Swink and Wilhelm's Plants of the Chicago Region. And anytime I have a plant that I know is growing somewhere in the Chicago region, I look it up in that book to see what associates with it. And then that leads me sort of down a trail of what's going to do well, because that's a pretty common issue. So I would select plants that can tolerate that spring wetness, and then you're going to have to do additional watering in the summer. Yeah. Okay. You want to add it?
No, I think.
Does that make sense?
I think that's a good answer.
That covers it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, all right. So we actually got to all the questions today. So again, if you had anything that pops in your head later today or over the weekend that you want to ask Carla, her email is up there. Also, please visit us, or you can find like some of the information we talked about at our website, midwestgroundcovers.com. And then we also have our YouTube page where we have a video series that we started last year that address various topics like hydrangeas and roses and ground covers and things like that. So you can look for our YouTube page. And then we also have our Instagram page as well, where we're posting a lot of shorter videos and other types of content. So if you're not following us there, please check that out too. So, looking forward to interacting with everyone as spring. It's after some cold weather the last couple of weeks. We finally got some nice stuff and nice weather here, and I think can start getting, in spring mode. So thank you so much for all joining us today, and look for that email afterwards. Again, if you're looking for CEUs, that quiz needs to be completed in 24 hours. And let us know what you thought of the presentation. So thanks. Have a great day. Thanks, Carla.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you. Are we still on?
Yeah, I'm answering one more question.
One more question, okay.
Yeah, it came in later. I can just type it in. So.
Shannon.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about that question about